Okay, so I will repeat that the meeting will not come to order. It's about 2 minutes after 6. We want to welcome everyone who is in the audience today, as well as those residents who are viewing or listening to us remotely. This is the meeting of the Cleveland Community Police Commission. Today is Wednesday, April 26, 2023, and we are meeting at the Gunning Recreation Center at 16700 Puritas Avenue in Cleveland. And again, welcome. We will have the roll call. Dr. John Adams.
Present.
Chandra Benito.
Present.
James Shura.
Present.
Charles Donaldson.
Present.
Pastor Kyle Earley.
Present.
Alana Garret Ferguson, that's an excused absence. Kate Kennedy, an excused absence. Gregory Reeves.
Present.
Pete Van Leer.
Present.
Audrianna Rodriguez.
Present.
Terry Wong. Sharina Zaid.
Present.
And I'm Jan Ridgeway, one of the two co-chairs for the commission. What we have decided to do is to follow Robert's Rules of Order, which we have already brought to the full commission, and it has been approved, but we want to begin our meetings from here on out, actually approving and adopting the agenda. So all commissioners have copies of the agenda? Can we entertain a motion to approve the agenda as it stands, please?
I move to approve the agenda.
Do we have a second?
I second that motion.
Okay, we will assume that that is all in agreement, and so we will adopt the agenda as is. On meeting decorum, we just want to say that we will have an opportunity for the public to make comments. You'll hear a little bit more about that shortly. And I will be asking that commissioners do not have side conversations, so all of us can hear, and the people in the audience can hear us as well. And I just have to remember too to make sure that when we speak, we turn this microphone on so that everyone can hear us. So thank you for those allowing me those comments, and we need to approve the minutes. Has everyone seen the last set of minutes? Do we have a motion to approve?
I will get them to you for next week, I'm sorry.
So we must have seen the previous ones then, right? Okay. So we will recognize that Ryan goofed, as he said. And we will hold those minutes for approval at the next minutes. Thanks for acknowledging that. That's okay. Thanks for acknowledging that. And now we will turn it over to my co-chair, Audrianna Rodriguez.
Thank you. So the next portion of our meeting will be public comment. The purpose of public comment is to ensure that community voices increase the visibility and understanding of issues regarding policing. We value every voice and every concern, and the first 30 minutes of the meeting is dedicated towards hearing you. In order to effectively perform our charges set forth in the consent decree and in our charter, we have to set some guidelines to help facilitate our meetings. A few include commissioners not responding to comments during this session, but we will take everything that you say into consideration. After the allotted time frame, if a pressing issue arises, any additional comments can be directed to staff, particularly Ms. Williams, who is the community engagement. If time permits, the co-chairs may reopen public comment at the end of the meeting. If there's anything that you need further follow-up on, you can email info@cpc.org. At this time, would any members of the community like to stand to this mic?
So Commissioner Terry Wong is not here, but she, as the chair of the Rules Committee, she wanted me to read a statement. Right now, during public comment? Before public comment.
I would suggest that.
It's pertaining to public comment in the rules.
Because we are not aware of what this message is, and we did provide guidelines for public comment. So it's not to override the Rules Committee.
To the chair, can I make that comment for her when you give the update, when she gives the updates on the Rules Committee? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any member of the community that would like to speak at this time? Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My public comments actually is about this guidelines for public comments. I personally attended the last Rules Committee meetings myself. Yes, I did not attend the whole meeting, but the majority part of it, I did. So there was no discussion at that time when I was in the meeting to talk about the guidelines for public comments. So here I see some of the changes made here, not exactly the same as we publicly discussed at the first and the second meeting. And I really think that all the commissioners, please recall what we discussed in the first two meetings. The reason we would like to have the setting that way, because first of all, it's hard for the people to come to the meeting right on time, 6 o'clock. Your position will be different. But public, lots of time having, nowadays, it's not always they can get off at a time people used to be, Monday through Friday, 8 to 4 or 9 to 5. So I would still say that for the people who already knows what they want to say, it's all right for them to say that at the beginning of the meeting. However, I'm glad our meeting has not been boring, has been very productive with lots of discussion and debates. So sometime during the meetings, the people coming late, they may hear something they have a question about or they have a feedback. So I still think that either you move the first public comments to the middle of the time somewhere, or we still should keep the last part towards the end of the meeting beyond. In that case, then people will really feel more comfortable that the commissioners are really open-minded and are really open to the public voices. The community, the reason we have a complaint for such a long time, that's because general public all believe that there's no proper menu for them to raise their voice. So finally, we got a new commissioner with a new settings. I hope we should have all these things. If you want to change the guideline, you should change that in the public meeting as well. In that case, people will know exactly what's going on. Then we show the community what transparency is. Because right now, we all say lots of the entity, it doesn't matter which department of the government we complain, no transparency, no accountability. So maybe we should set an example. Even for the change of the guideline, there should be transparency about it. Thank you.
Any other further comment?
Hi, do I have to turn it on or something? Okay. Well, so am I, Lou. Okay. My name is Rosie Palfy. I'm a community advocate. And first of all, I want to thank you all. You had a training on Saturday, and you let the public ask questions. And so I learned a lot. And I also learned a lot from your questions, because they're questions I haven't heard in the 7.5 years I've been involved in police reform. And it really helped put together pieces of the puzzle. Excuse me. So as you know, I've been involved in crisis intervention, serving on the City of Cleveland Mental Health Response Advisory Committee that most people don't know exist. And since we have some union leaders here, I wanted to say that I have always advocated to have the unions involved. The way the police commission was before, recommendations were being made on every policy with the exception of crisis intervention. MRAC has always been in a silo, and I have said in numerous MRAC meetings that, I realize the unions are busy, our meeting times may not have been convenient for them, but even if they could send us an email with policy recommendations, because officers are being held to account for the recommendations we are making for policies. And also, I became concerned when I watched some officer professional standards presentations to the Civilian Police Review Board, seeing that officers were being suspended for not filling out a crisis intervention stat sheet. Now, it's important to fill that out, but I would think for a first time that should be a written reprimand. And, I was concerned seeing officers getting suspended. And, we should have been able to be involved in that and make recommendations about if they're needed to put out a division notice, something to train officers so they knew, because sometimes they show up on a call and it's not a crisis call when it's dispatched, but they get there and they find out it's a crisis call. So I just wanted to bring that up. The other thing is, I just want to remind everybody that there was a great meeting today with the safety committee, and I want to praise Councilman Charles Slay for his participation, his questions and comments. But I just want to point out, when you see the slide presentation, everything's on there with the exception of two things: the district policing committees and the City of Cleveland Mental Health Response Advisory Committee. So again, I know you all have a lot on your plate, but at some point you're going to have to figure out how crisis intervention fits into this puzzle, because potentially you could have cases in front of you to decide involving crisis intervention. So, and the other thing is, I want to point out that one of the things that really upset residents, and I think in part led to the Issue 24 initiative, was people would come to these meetings and ask questions, okay? And they come back and there were no responses from the administration, okay? So I came back, I made comments about the new version of the MRAC. Nobody's here to answer those questions. And I will say that in the 2 weeks since that happened, the following day after the last police commission meeting, the Mental Health Response Advisory Subcommittee, Training Subcommittee Chair, who is an Adams Board employee, held a what I'll call a secret meeting, because the public, it wasn't posted anywhere. I found out about it at the last minute. I was able to attend. Thankfully, Commissioner Benito was there as well. But I brought up a lot of concerns. Dr. Lee Anderson was there. One of my concerns was the fact that they had already started crisis intervention training 2 or 3 weeks earlier, and they hadn't even submitted the training to the court. Dr. Anderson did not acknowledge any of my concerns and say she would look into it. And lo and behold, the next day I checked the public records and it had been submitted on PACER. And I want the police officers to know that here, 2 years ago, I sent something to the training committee when we were making suggestions about future training. I suggested suicide by cop, and I included information from the Police Executive Research Forum, PERF, and it was very, very detailed information. And the crisis intervention coordinator at the time said nobody talks to him about being concerned about suicide by cop. And one of the things I brought up was that a few years prior, there had been an incident where an officer was praised. It was a national story about how great this officer handled trying to de-escalate the situation. It was a deadly force situation. He had been shot at. So unfortunately, the training they're doing this year on suicide awareness prevention does not include suicide by cop, but I just want you to know, I also brought that up last year. So people are trying to advocate for you all and for your safety. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to step forward at this time?
How's everyone? My name is Leon Meredith. I'm an activist on the east side, local government also, Ward 7, Precinct K. And I would like to address the driving issues. You know, I was driving about 2 weeks ago, and I was coming across Carnegie on 89th, and I'm an aware driver, and I had the green light. It turned green as I was approaching, and the driver was coming across, and his speed, he's about 150 feet away, and I knew he couldn't stop. So I jammed on my brakes, and I stopped before the white line, before the crosswalk, and he hit his brakes and skeeted past me. He would have, did a lot of damage to me. And he was over here, maybe, 1 o'clock, and he raised a can of beer up to me, and like a gesture, like, my fault, man. It's so many people that's driving in my community without insurance, reckless, and there's something going to be done about these black tinted windows. This is it's scary, and it's a hazard. I think that something needs to be done about these two things by the police force, and it seems like they're being ignored. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to come forward?
Is that okay to add something? Sorry, Lou again. There's one thing I'm not sure how everybody here or people right now watching are thinking. But this commission is here. That's because we want everybody in the community to be safe. Not just the residents, not just the visitor from out of town, especially our asset, our police officers. Lots of time people always like to put their fingers to blame somebody else. Of course, it's hard for them to pinpoint whatever, so they all pushed everything to officers. I am a new MRAC member myself, and I have the same question because in the past I attended MRAC meeting as a community member. I do not understand why all the training or all the policies are set for police officers to do lots of things they have not actually originally meant to do. That actually puts their safety in jeopardy. They put their health, especially mental health, in jeopardy. None of the police force in this country is saying, to be a police officer, you have to go through 7 years medical school training. So how would you let the officer to understand the person right now they are looking at, this person is because doing things like this, talking like this, behaving like this, is because blood sugar extremely low, or this person is in crisis with the families or loved ones, in this case, not loved anymore. Or there's mental health issue involved. Or this person is actually being threatened by a loan shark or whatever possible situation in people's life. Police officers are trained to deal with urgent and deadly situations. That's why they are trained to shoot, to kill. Do they really all want to kill people? We can set up a policy saying they have to go through some kind of checkup procedure to make sure they are mentally balanced to come into the force. That, I guess, we can make a policy. But when things happen in the split seconds, new officers would not have the same experience as the senior officers. They may have made a mistake. But it seems that all the disciplinary results are not really adequately put on all officers. Some of officers got suspended for something not really as serious as some other issues. And this is the reason why the commission is here to straighten all these things out. So we will have a force, a happy police force, to truly do what they want to do, to protect and serve the community. Lots of things, just like that gentleman just said. Some of the people in the community do not watch out what they are doing. That also gives the police officers extra pressures, because officers right now, they have to worry about, if I do this, would I be blamed? If I do that, would I be suspended? However, we do know lots of the officers, when they came into the force, their background was not thoroughly checked. This is the reason why there are lots of things we should tackle in order to strengthen our police force. Especially right now, we do have a workforce issue within the first responders too. So I wish that Commissioner will really learn lots of things which maybe you did not know about, you have not been told about. Mental health issue is for everybody, officers and residents, both. We all need training, we all need education in order to have the life in harmonies together. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments?
Okay, this question is coming by way of Black Lives Matter founder and CEO, Ms. Latanya Goldsby, who is watching via live stream. She wants to know about the update on CPRB coming back before the commission. Or have there been any updates? Michael Hess and other co-chair. Do we know anything about that?
You want me to? At this time, it's not scheduled for CPRB to return in the immediate future. But I do know that they said today that the head of OPS will be here soon, maybe within a week. So once they get settled in, they will appear.
So I believe there's no further questions, so we're going to proceed with the next portion of our meeting, which consists of guest presentation from the President, Cleveland Police Patrolmen's Association, Jeff Follmer, as well as President of Fraternal Order of Police, Lodge 8, Jim O'Malley. And at this time, questions and answers of the guests is only for commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you. Hope everybody can hear me. So my name is Jim O'Malley. I'm a captain with the Cleveland Division of Police. I'll speak on behalf of the FOP first, if that's okay, even though it's kind of out of order. I'm a almost 27-year veteran of the Cleveland Police Department, and I just as a personal note, I've been nothing but proud to be a Cleveland police officer my whole life. I'm actually a fourth-generation Cleveland police officer going back to 1875. So I take being a police officer and everything that goes along with it very serious. Before I get into anything with the FOP, I want to welcome everybody to West Park. I'm a West Park neighbor, a neighborhood resident. Councilman, thank you for being here. Welcome to our great area of this city. So just to give a little bit of background about the Fraternal Order of Police. There might be some questions as to why there's two police unions, police organizations in the city of Cleveland. So I'll touch on that briefly and go a little bit over the differences between the two, and then I'll turn it over to Jeff to maybe add on to that a little bit. So the Fraternal Order of Police as a national organization was founded in 1915 in Pittsburgh. So law enforcement organizations go back that far. They're nothing new. The Cleveland branch of the Fraternal Order of Police was founded in 1934 as Fraternal Order of Police Lodge 8. So essentially we are the 8th lodge in the nation, if you will, dealing with labor issues related to the police. In 1969, so from 1934 to 1969, the Fraternal Order of Police was the only police organization, union, if you will, for police officers in the city of Cleveland. The FOP represented everybody from patrol officer on up to, I suppose at that time, the chief. In 1969, there was a vote held by the patrol officers to break away and form the CPPA, which is where the CPPA comes in. So currently, the Fraternal Order of Police Lodge 8 that I represent, we represent the sergeants, lieutenants, captains, and commanders, with the exception of, I think, 2 commanders within our organization. I need to back up. I'm also represented by Captain Dan Bernath, who's my vice president, who's in the audience here as well. He'll tell me tomorrow if I don't acknowledge him today, so I have witnesses that he's acknowledged. That's who we represent in the Fraternal Order of Police. So our focus is the supervisory aspect of it. A big part of what came about with issue 24, from my study of it, is that there was a question of accountability and the supervision of police officers. So obviously it's important that we have supervisors on the street with our officers every day, making sure they're doing the right things, making sure that they are following the rules. If there's questions, looking up. To err is human, people make mistakes. It's obviously something we all live with. But when things go awry, when issues come up, when discipline comes around, our responsibility, or part of our responsibility within the Fraternal Order of Police, is to represent the officers. And the representation is not to get them out of trouble. Officers know when they make mistakes, they take accountability for their mistakes. I think if you look back through a number of the disciplines that I personally have witnessed, the supervisors do take accountability. They admit when they make fault. There may be a disagreement in the interpretation of the policy. You know, I thought this, the city thinks that, but ultimately they do say, okay, I did not have my camera on, or what it might be, but here's why, and they offer an explanation. So it's important that everybody understands that the union's job is not to get people out of trouble. And it seems like that's kind of across the board, everybody thinks that of police organizations. It's to ensure, we are to ensure, not just us, but also with the help of attorneys, because we do have attorneys on staff that we contract with, but to ensure that the contract that is negotiated between the City of Cleveland and the Fraternal Order of Police, and the rights that are built up, going back to, you know, collective bargaining in Ohio is, I think, around 1984, 1985 is when it came in. So our contract that we work off of basically has its foundation then. So we're talking almost, 40 years of a contract that has been built and developed and morphed through the years. So a big objective, a big goal that we have as a leader, myself personally, is to ensure that the contract is upheld, to make sure that the timelines are upheld, to make sure that the officer has the due process that is spelled out in the contract. A lot of people wonder, what do they do? What do we do? Well, that's a big part of our job, is ensuring that what is agreed upon between the two organizations, the organization of the City of Cleveland and the organization of the Fraternal Order of Police, that the members get fair representation. And that's one of the most important things that I try to do, and myself and Captain Bernath, and our whole executive board. It's not just the two of us running this. We do have an executive board that we run decisions past when it comes to certain things. So again, uphold the negotiated contract between the City of Cleveland and the Fraternal Order of Police is the first and foremost. We're also there to support and advocate for in our case, the supervisory officers within the Division of Police, and then Jeff for the detectives and patrol officers and dispatchers. Support and advocate, what does that mean? A big part of that is, we are part of a national organization, so we have the outreach that we can to get to the national and state. When we see a need for maybe change at the national level, we have, through the Fraternal Order of Police, through the National Fraternal Order of Police, we have the ability to reach out from the state to the national to bring attention to our lawmakers in Washington that, hey, these are problems that we're facing. The different crises that happen in the city, mental health issues, suicide by cop is huge. Suicide of police officers with the stress they deal with is another huge problem in this world, in this country, that we have the help through the national organization. So we advocate and we support our officers in that way as well. We support them when they have problems in their personal lives. And we have officers that, may fall upon hard times, go through divorces, have drinking problems, whatever it is. We don't turn our back on them. Yeah, it's not in the contract that this, that, or the other happens, but I'm a human being and I'm a veteran police officer and I'm going to be there for them. Maybe it's a matter of getting them home safely or whatever it might be. So supporting, advocating, upholding the negotiated settlement or agreement between the City of Cleveland is what the Fraternal Order of Police, I'm sure Jeff would echo a lot of what I just said there. If I may just take a quick moment to say, what is kind of what would we like of the commission? I'm going to steal from Channel 19. I hope I don't get sued for saying that, but fair and impartial is all that we're looking for. There is a a belief and understanding within the Division of Police, at least a lot of the supervisors, that when they're disciplined, it's not fair, it's not balanced. As policies get set up and as things get rolling with the commission, anybody's just looking to be treated fairly. As I said a few minutes ago, to err is human. We make mistakes. There have been situations where you're making split-second decisions and maybe you misinterpreted a may or a they or an and a can in a policy. But the situation has to be dealt with. You can't walk away from it. And maybe I made that little mistake, but is it worth, whatever the discipline might be for that situation, a day off or 2 days off, or is it something that could be a learning moment? So as things develop with the commission, and I know you have a lot of work to do, I hope that we can have a relationship to the point that what came out of the audience today, and I appreciate your comments, is it reminds me, and I hope it reminds all of us in the room, that the problem is not just the Cleveland Police doing things wrong problem. There's a community issue that I'm hoping, as a resident of the city of Cleveland, that maybe the police commission can also help push maybe for change in laws or community outreach, because a lot of times people don't listen to the police, but if there's another outreach through the churches or whatever it might be that the commission can be the face of, boy, that's great, because then it helps the police officers do their job properly. It helps a better understanding of what we do or why we do what we do. I know there was a little bit of talk about the contracts and everything. I don't want to get too far off base. Let me turn it over to Detective Follmer real quick for a little background on his organization. Thank you.
Thank you. I won't be probably as detailed as Captain O'Malley was. I didn't know what to expect here tonight, and I didn't prepare anything. So I've been a policeman for 31 years. I brought a few people with me that's on our executive board. Our executive board is made up of 9 people. Dave Medina, who is the vice president and will be retiring next month after 33 years. Andy Gaszewski, he is a second VP by our bylaws. He will be moving up to vice president. Tom Ross, who is a trustee right now, and Amanda Klein, who represents our dispatchers. It's interesting times. I talk freely pretty much to the media when they ask me questions and stuff like that. There was always concern about issue 24, but it's here, it's past us. Like Jimmy said, we're looking for fairness. We want to make sure that there's accountability, but we also need to make sure the residents are safe and stuff like that. One thing I want to know, and this goes to your question, sir, before, it's scary times right now. We're probably, by the end of the summer, going down to about 900 officers, which will put us down to 300, 400, whatever the new numbers are right now. Officers, let's just say there's 10 to a shift, 5, 6, or 7 will get held over to the next shift. So they're working 16, 18 hours a day. And it's rough out there right now. Services like traffic, looking for stolen cars. I'd be surprised if there's really much any enforcement going out there. There's no time. They're busy. They're short. They're tired. It's a transition time where I think the division and they're hiring an outside firm to try to figure out what we're going to do here in the future. But I can tell you this summer is going to be rough. The violence out there is real. We do make mistakes, but our main objective is to make sure the streets are safe, citizens are taken care of, and I think right now, I don't think we're held accountable a lot. There's cameras everywhere. Obviously, the DOJ micromanages every little thing that we do. Internal affairs, OPS, inspections unit, all have a job to make sure we do the right thing. I think if you ever have to weigh in discipline, you'll see a lot of things are fair. We are heavily disciplined. A lot of officers, it's financial to them. They lose a lot of time off. And the things that you're going to see are really not outrageous. Unfortunately, I have more problems with off-duty conduct than I do with things happening and on duty. But we're here, we're open. And we're willing to look at this day by day to see what happens. So thank you for your time.
Would any commissioner like to ask a question? Chair Ridgeway.
Thank you for your comments, both of you. I have spent an inordinate amount of time reviewing both contracts, highlighted lots of notes, making sure that I understand, you know, your responsibilities, your roles, the protection that both your unions or associations offer for, you know, for the police. But there's one question that I couldn't figure out, you know, in terms of the contract, and I think it's listed in both contracts. So if an officer retires and then comes back after a period of time, let's say 3 months later or whatever, does that officer cash out his benefits when he retires? Or then when he comes back, he doesn't just pick up where he left off and those benefits continue to accrue? I didn't quite understand. I mean, there were statements in both contracts about retirement, but it didn't say anything about if that officer turns around and comes back within a couple of weeks. Not retirement, resignations. I'm sorry.
Good. They do cash out. They do go to another, if they go to another city. They come back, I believe it's the Civil Service Commission, through recommendations of the Safety Director and Chief, that can bring them back. If they come back, they lose all seniority, but they also come back, if they had 5 years on, they come back at the pay rate of 5 years, or as a 5-year police officer. So they do cash out, to answer your question, because they did officially resign.
Commissioner Weaves?
First of all, I want to thank you both for being here today. Mine is more of a comment than a question, but when you mentioned you want fairness, I've talked to a lot of retired police that I know, and they were totally against this commission because they felt like it was overkill, and I get it. But the problem was the community hasn't and doesn't right now trust the police. So we're not here to get you. We want to work with you to be that bridge between the police and the community. We want to, like the young man over there was talking about, we want to talk about those things too, not just trying to, because unfortunately your mistakes are not glorified, that's not the word I want to use, but your mistakes are magnified through the media. Any mistake you make, and that's all the community sees. So we want to understand and work with you all so we can kind of let them know, like, hey, this stuff that the community doesn't know that you all know about certain cases. And we just want to be able to be that bridge so we can all work together and make this city safer.
And real quick, I would totally agree with what you're saying. And I would ask the commission, if something does come up, that you call on us to have a conversation. You know, let us voice what we know, because we usually know the supervisors or the officers firsthand what they were thinking. A lot of these things, they don't let the investigations go out. They form an opinion, and all of a sudden, let's get them, that's discipline, stuff like that. Our numbers are easy. We can give everybody our numbers and have a conversation with us so we can give you the other side, what the other side is thinking, instead of the public perception or what the media is putting out there.
Commissioner Benito?
I want to echo what Commissioner Reeves said. Thank you for coming. And, you know, I believe that I speak for everyone on the commission that we do want to have a relationship with both the organizations, and, you know, look forward to seeing what the common ground is that we have, and common goals that we might have that will advance the safety of and the health of your officers and also of the community. I kind of wanted to ask a question about, you both talked about, you know, your desire for fairness and impartiality. I would love to hear from you. I think there are going to be times where we might not agree on the outcome, right? And sometimes when people look at fairness and impartiality, they're looking at the outcome, right? But I recognize that there are going to be times that probably us as an organization and you as an organization might not agree on the outcome. But what would signify to you that you're seeing fairness and impartiality from us. Because I know that that's a real concern that we have as a commission also. We want to make sure that we are being fair and impartial, and we want to build that trust with the Division of Police and the officers. And we also want to also protect the officers as well. So I would just love to know what would that look like for you guys that you see from us?
Thank you. I could just speak kind of on my own or for myself, because I represent an organization, but I'm one person. I'm one veteran police officer versus, the whole crew. I personally would look for, and I'm sure that everybody they do represent would like to see fairness in the process. In other words, due process, not missing steps, allowing the proper timeframes that we have that are negotiated on by the city, through whatever grievance process it might be, or through arbitration, or whatever the end result might be. Arbitration is how you resolve things. You may say one thing, I may say another, and if we don't agree with it, the discipline, and it goes that way. For me, it's how we get to that point to make sure that that's done properly. That investigations that are done, whether it be through internal affairs, the inspections unit, or by members of the Office of Professional Standards, take everything into account and not have it one-sided for one party or the other for that matter. Put everything on the table and let those making a decision have access to everything to make that decision. I'm not saying one person has, I'm just saying that as part of the process, put it all out there, not hold something back or maybe color it one way or the other to favor one or the other. Put it out there and let those that make a decision do that. That's what I personally would like to see, and I think if my understanding of the charter and everything that came along with the change to the city charter is that you have the authority, you have a power. Was there 20 different bullet points that the commission is empowered to do or have some input in? Everything from policy to the appointment of a commander. That's a lot of power. I appreciate everybody putting in their applications and being interested in it. Jim Chura was a member, and I appreciate the mayor willing to follow the guidelines of the charter that allows a member who was a retired police officer to sit on this, because I feel, and I think I speak for everybody, police officers in the room, that it's important that if you're coming into this from a civilian world, like you said, you read the contract, ma'am, and you're like, there's a lot in there. I keep a copy at home to look at, because when I get that call in 2 a.m. about, am I allowed to stay late, I have to look it up because I can't remember everything. So it's important. I just want to kind of say it publicly. I appreciate retired Captain Chura not only volunteering, but ultimately the mayor for seating him, because he's an asset for you on this organization to say, hey, why do they do it like this? Why do they? And he's got the institutional knowledge, having 30 plus years in the police department, to say, oh, I remember why that came about, or this came about, or why we do that. So it's an absolute asset. So I kind of got off track. I'm sorry, but I have to acknowledge Jim on that. Jeff, anything else?
No, it's more about, can you repeat the question? I'm sorry. You're talking about Captain Chair so much, I forgot the question.
Absolutely. So my question was, what would signify to you, what are you looking for to show that would demonstrate, that we are doing that fairness, or that through our actions as a commission that we are being fair and impartial?
Just like I said, go back to communication. Make sure you educate yourself. Make sure that if you hear the story, that you dive a little bit deeper and get all the facts from everything, and just make the decisions factually. It's not personal opinion, and it's what's in black and white and how the outcome comes, how the interviews come and stuff like that. A lot of time people form opinions. It's not about our opinions. It's about what happened factually. So if you keep things factually, and if you have a concern about something, again, talk to us and we'll give her our side to why we thought it was fair. I mean, we are heavily disciplined right now. I mean, I don't think between the safety director and chief, the discipline, I think when you start reviewing it and what's happened in the past, you're going to see that we are disciplined. So, like I said, if you have different opinions on how things should be done or discipline or whatever comes across, that you communicate, educate yourself, and just listen to the facts.
Thank you. Commissioner Donaldson.
Thank you. Thank you again for being here. Can you talk to us about the process of the CBA and how that works as far as updates and changes? Because when I was reading through one of them, I did notice that it's effective through March of 2025. So I'm just wondering, once we get closer to that date, what's going to happen and how that process will look, and then also who will be involved in, the process of updating the new CBA.
Sure. So every contract has spelled out in it a timeline that the city and the union have to agree upon when they're going to start negotiations. I think it's 90 days out. They have to give notice of intent to, everything that's in that contract, again, has its basis in the collective bargaining laws of 1985. There's a whole section of the Ohio Revised Code, I think it's 4117 something, that spells out what can and cannot be bargained on and things of that nature. The contracts, when we get closer to that time frame, January, we'll notify the city we intend to negotiate with them, and they will notify us, okay, we intend to negotiate with you. And then from there, as an organization, we have the authority and the right to select members of our organization to be part of our bargaining unit, to be part of our negotiation team. We send out a survey to our members. What's important to you right now? We get texts and calls and everybody, but I need to know what the officer working night shift in the 5th District that I don't get to see all that often, what he's thinking, what's important to him. What is he coming across over the last year of the term of this contract that should be addressed. So ultimately, as it goes through, we as an organization and then the city as an organization, we come up with a list basically of what our wishes are and what their wishes are. Obviously we're looking to keep officers, we're looking to retain officers, we're hoping to get an increase in pay. These are things that help keep people here, so we're not losing them constantly to suburbs after they get out of our police academy. The things that whatever the list is that we come up with, and then we sit down in a negotiation and we set that up. You have similar setting of this, where you're across from each other and you go through each of them, explain why you want it, and the city, in this case, will explain why they shouldn't have it. And then some things you come on common ground, and some things you don't. And we both, as negotiating parties, have to make a decision. Is this something that we want to, basically take to arbitration to have the third party decide who's going to win, for lack of better terms? So that's kind of the whole process. And then after it's agreed upon, you either come up with a tentative agreement, and then we take it to the membership to vote on it, which was the last case. We were able to hash out things, withdraw some things on both sides. The city did and we did. We took it to our membership and voted on it, and we didn't have to go to arbitration because we came to the agreement of what was in the changes that were going to be made from both sides, essentially. And the members voted in, we signed it, and we'll do this again in 2025, which is right around the corner. So I hope that explained the process a little bit. I'm not a labor lawyer, but I think that maybe gives you a little bit of a snapshot of what needs to be done with it.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Sure. Is there anything, Jeff, I missed? Or? Okay.
Commissioner Pete.
Yeah, thank you, Captain O'Malley and Detective Follmer, for coming. I want to echo that, and also to commissioners who've said, we're looking to build a relationship with y'all. I guess I have a question around staffing. So just in terms of thinking, obviously it's not just a Cleveland police problem, it's nationally, and it's not even just a police problem. There's a lot of areas, it's a lot of public service areas where it's hard to find staff. And mental health, behavioral health, a lot of systems are struggling with that. So I'm curious to know, and I'm looking back at a report from a couple years ago where Cleveland was actually at the top, pretty near the top of the list of larger cities, over 250,000 in terms of officer to resident ratios. So it seemed like it was a relatively large department for a city the size of Cleveland. So I'm wondering, in that context, what do you see what are the solutions you see? Like, how would you ensure adequate staff along the police? What were the things you would do? Would that include trying to, there's a lot of talk that I have been working on around, doing non-police response for certain kinds of issues, or what are the things you think would draw people in to be police officers in Cleveland? I know there's salary issues with the suburbs and all that, but I'd just like to hear what your positive here's how we might address that issue.
I think there's probably a litany as to why people don't want to be police officers now. Everything from it just doesn't interest some people to the money to whoever it might be. I don't know what the answer is to attracting people to law enforcement across the board. I really don't. I sit and try and think of it. There's committees and everything else set up to try and figure it out, and a lot of it doesn't come up with anything useful. I don't know what the absolute answer is. I know the feedback that I've heard, some of it's generational. You know, some of the younger kids don't want to be policemen. They just don't. Simple as that. Some of it's a monetary issue. Some of it is they don't want the scrutiny when they can make the same amount of money, you know, in construction. It's harder work, but I don't have to worry about, you know, losing my job for a minor mistake. Something, you know, that maybe that's part of it. As far as the changes that may need to be made, those are administrative changes, that obviously decisions. You know, I can't sit here and say that, you know, we shouldn't do this or we shouldn't do that. What I do know is that the city of Cleveland, although we've lost population considerably in our lifetimes, we're still 77 square miles. There's still, you know, an elderly person who lives at the end of a street that when she calls 911, he calls 911, he wants the police there. A lot of what we do is based on calls for service, and there's a lot of calls for service. So, yeah, we do have a higher number, and I wish it was so simple that we had enough officers that we could all be walking the beat like it was in 1950. It's just not. I don't have the direct answer for that. Kind of my opinion is that we can't forget that the city's size has not changed, even though the population has shifted, and every citizen deserves, you know, Detroit, if I'm not mistaken, years ago, Detroit cut off sections of their city. Like, we're not responding to that. They shut off the utilities, you know, law enforcement, fire, and we're not going to have that in Cleveland, obviously, right? If somebody calls the police, they want the police there. And that's something that I think the administration needs to keep in mind, is that we're the same size area, and if somebody calls the police at the corner of the city, they want the police there. I went off on a tangent. I apologize for that. I wish I had the answer for it. I don't, but there's my 2 cents for what it's worth. Jeff?
Yeah, this administration is going to be challenged to try to figure this out. This is probably the lowest as we've been in, probably the lowest we've ever been. You have to worry about the citizens getting their service, but also it's going to be stressful on our officers. So there's going to be some challenging work, and you know, it's getting nice and it gets busier. So, like Jimmy said, I'm not sure what the answers are, but they are putting committees together and trying to figure out these things, because we're going to be at a scary level. I know there's at least another 150 to 180 that are eligible to or might be retiring by June, which could put us at a 900 easy, maybe a little bit lower. So, you know, if I can say anything to the commission, that's going to be probably one of the biggest things that we start working on right away to figure out what we do here. But they're going to be faced with a lot of challenges, the administration.
Any other questions? And then I'll go after you.
Okay, so first I want to say thank you for being here. Wow, down to 900 in the summer. I'm not looking forward to that. And I do think that we definitely need to figure out a way to pay our officers more. I'm going to ask a question on behalf of a commissioner that couldn't be here today. She wanted me to she texted this in and wanted me to ask you guys. It's Terry Wong. So she wrote, "It may not be widely known that the powers given to the commission through issue 24 only allows the commission to increase discipline against officers, except in incidents of whistleblowing and retaliation. Could you please comment from the union's perspective as to how prevalent whistleblowing and retaliation are among the Cleveland police force, considering that these are two powerful mechanisms to shift police culture for the better? Have you guys ever defended cases against whistleblowing or retaliation, and can you give any examples of any cases if you have?"
I don't know if I personally sat in on any interviews with officers that didn't. Well, here's a better way to put it. We've had officers, supervisors, held accountable for not calling for certain things. You know, they didn't call because of a witness use of force or a potential witness use of force or things like that. As far as, you know, the level of retaliation, in other words, you know, are officers afraid of being disciplined, or not disciplined, afraid of retaliation? I think that there's enough steps in place that nobody should be afraid, if there's a problem, to go forward. You know, we have general police orders that address retaliation, the powers that are spelled out in the charter amendment, but also City Hall through Human Resources has EEOC for these types of complaints for retaliation. I'm sure that it goes on not only with the police department but in every other part of the city. I don't know that the only thing I'm kind of familiar with is if somebody didn't do something, you know, and then trust me, they're held accountable for it. Any examples, Jeff, you can think of?
No, I have no example, but it does go through human resources. They do investigate it and then make their findings to the chief, so.
Okay, I'm sorry, there's one follow-up question that she wanted me to ask. She's watching. So, what can the commission do to empower police officers to enact positive change within the Cleveland Division of Police?
I didn't really hear you. Could you say it one more time? I'm sorry.
Sure. What can the commission do to empower police officers to enact positive change within the Cleveland Division of Police?
And I guess what I'd ask, what would change be, I mean, we want support out there.
Right.
You know, we want support for our actions, and then we want to be heard out. We want us to hear what we did, why we did it. So there's enough mechanisms in there for discipline and for us to be watched. But we also, you know, support these guys. Like I said, I'm repeating myself, but they're working 16, 18 hours a day. They're tired, so probably need a support mechanism.
And I think I would just add, if I may, that, you know, a big part of it has to do with community outreach, which is another focus of the consent decree, not so much the police commission, but the consent decree. The only way we're going to have proper community outreach is staff. And until we solve the staffing problem, it's going to be kind of an endless summer of 900 officers going from run to run to run, where they're not going to have the opportunities to get out of the car and speak with the store owners as much as they want to or as that they should. So I hope that sheds a little bit of light on her question.
I agree with what you said. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask a question. I'm glad that you came to the meeting and stated that you are open to working with us, especially prior, because we saw various news articles about as soon as we make a decision that you're going to take us to court, as well as receiving an article from Aisha Hardway about just the history of unions interfering with possible reform. So my question one to you is, how do you believe that the police union will work in efforts to ensure that we're working collaboratively and ensuring that it's just not statements in the meeting, but just possible suggestions and ideas? And as well, it is my hope, if the union does create a barrier, that we think of innovative solutions, such as addressing the contract or pursuing ideas of a more progressive union, such as we did with the monitors and having various unions compete for city bids.
I turned it back on, yeah. That was like a curveball, and a fastball. And you got me on the fastball. So I don't know what the Guardians are doing today. There's a collective bargaining agreement between the city of Cleveland. So the steps that happen after that, we have to ensure, and our priority is to ensure that whatever's agreed upon through negotiation that winds up, you know, wherever it does, whether it winds up in an agreement or an arbitration, and then settled through that, we have to abide by that. Both parties would, you know. So that's that. The processes that might be coming, I think it would be unfair to speak about that because, you know, we don't know what they are yet. I mean, so if that answers part of one of your questions, I think that was the fastball. But give me the curveball again.
So as the union, what are some methods that you see really working with us to ensure that we're not repeating historical trends of the union sometimes creating a barrier to police reform?
Well, like I said, if both parties are, and by parties, I'm now in this case I'm talking about the FOP and the police commission. What's spelled out in that contract is what we want to uphold. So what might be interpreted by somebody as a wall or as a barrier might just be sticking up for the membership. That's what's negotiated upon. So yeah, it might come across as, hey, they're trying to do this, but the reality is it might be spelled out somewhere in a contract that it can't be done that way, and it comes across as, hey, they're trying to stop everything we're trying to do. We want safe officers, just like you want safe officers. We want officers that can get some sleep at night because they're not working 16-hour days and go home to their family, just like everybody that's watching and is in this room wants. So I don't know that I would categorize it as a wall or as a barrier, but if those things happen, you know, there's dialogue that should happen. Should be the first step, is a phone call. And I can tell you, for me, I will talk to people, and if it's kind of above my pay grade. I mean, that mean if it's something as a legal issue that we need to involve our union's lawyer, that's what we need to do, because then you have the law department to hash out those things, if it's at that level. But I think both things could start with a phone call. And listen, just like in everything, we're not going to agree on everything that comes across. It's just the way that life is. I try a phone call first, and if that doesn't work, then you take it to the next step, which might be, closing my arms and pouting in the corner. I don't know. But step number one, which is all I should speak about, would be trying to have some kind of a dialogue to find out what's the problem. And if it is, hey, this is contractual, we can't do this or the other, then hey, they're not just it's not just me turning my back and walking away from you. I'm explaining to you, hey, it's contractual. And then you at least know that that's why I'm turning my back and walking away. That makes sense. Thank you.
Commissioner Pete.
Thanks. I guess.
Well, I'll just be 2 seconds. I mean, we just, I made those comments, obviously, and we just want respect for our collective bargaining. We don't want to go to court. We want to get along. We want to make things fair for officers. We want to work. I've said it 2 or 3 times. Jimmy just said it. There needs to be communication. Our language speaks for ourselves. It was negotiated with the city. If you look at our Bill of Rights, that outlines everything that we have for our officers' rights. So we just ask that you respect it. Like you said, we might not always agree, but let's talk about if we're not in disagreement. Unfortunately, on these steps, the only way we get there is by taking things to court or to arbitration. So that's how we resolve things. We don't find things fairly. But I'm not here to start a war. I mean, I'm here to play fair. But we are prepared that we have our contract and we don't want to violate it. That's it.
Thank you. We look forward to working with you, and hopefully we're able to resolve any issues, especially our side of the court, because it is taxpayer dollars. Commissioner Pete.
Yeah, thanks. This is a follow-up question on the staffing issue. So it's my understanding that earlier this week, when things were happening in Akron, CDP sent bike officers down to Akron for crowd control.
They did.
And so I have a couple of questions around that. One is what do you think about that, given what we just talked about, how the staffing shortage where people are working 16, 18-hour shifts? And the other is where is that decision made to do that?
So it's made in the chief's office. When we had our protests going down, there was a lot of cities and suburbs that came down. I don't know what the conversation between the Akron and the chief were. They needed people and stuff like that. It's more of a question for a chief. I mean, obviously it leaves us short here. I don't know if people were off already and they went down there and they were paid overtime through the city of Akron. So there's a lot of variables but the chief would make that decision. And like I said, we had a lot of help from different suburbs all over the place when we had everything going on down here.
All right, thanks. Hopefully they didn't make them ride their bikes to Akron, I suppose.
We got Chair Jan.
Just 2 questions. The first, since this commission is not the entity that sits at the negotiation table, it's the city that does that. And I have been fortunate enough to actually been in arbitration and mediation training with policemen in other places where I have worked. Do you think it would be beneficial that there is some kind of training that would bring the police and the commission together to look at mediation, to look at arbitration, to see if there are ways that we could prevent problems? Because we're not the ones who sit at the table, during negotiations. But I know that in previous jobs that I've been in, it was actually beneficial to sit with police, with trained consultants coming in and working us through an arbitration or a mediation process. So that's one question.
I think any training is good. If you look at our training that the Division of Police goes through, officers are constantly being trained. So for me, any training that makes me a better police officer or union official or commissioner in your case can't be bad. I don't know how that plays into the kind of the legal component of a negotiation. There's a process in place already, and some of that is guided by state law. So I don't know about working things out. Right now, we have a grievance process, an arbitration process to resolve that, and if that doesn't work, you have the common pleas court for that. Outside of resolving a specific problem through those channels, to me, any training is I think reasonable. It's, whether we can all get on the same page to do it at a certain time, I think, but there's already avenues to fix that. I don't know, maybe I'm misunderstanding your question, like, trying to resolve things without the arbitration or the, those processes are already established that, I don't think we can deviate from.
So maybe perhaps the training could help from the standpoint of understanding why, how those pieces were put in place and why there can be no deviation. I understand from a union perspective and contractual perspective about, the agreement once it's signed off on, but just in terms of our understanding that, as a commission, to help us do our job better. You both have shared information this evening about your process for how your contracts are developed. And I think we are still learning all of this. And so that's why I raised that question, whether you thought some kind of mediation or arbitration training would be beneficial.
I'm sorry to interrupt. One thing I would recommend, and I don't know how you do it, and it's usually hundreds of pages on these arbitration decisions, as you know, but that would be a good place to start to get a handful of these and look at the conclusions and what the arbitrators are thinking. As we prepare to go to arbitration and things like that, we have to, plan for these things too. I think it would be good for the commission to see some of these arbitration decisions. We have a bunch of them. I mean, it's hundreds of pages. I mean, we could find some and give you some and stuff like that if you wanted, but I think it's beneficial to see how arbitrators are ruling and what facts they're ruling on. A lot of stuff goes by the, what has happened in the past.
Thank you both. The last question is also a comment first. We had a very informative, I think, training on Saturday, 8 hours training. I'm trying to remember whether any of your officers were there. Yeah, I see. And it was very good for us, and I hope that it was as beneficial for you. But one of the issues that came up that we spent some time talking about was the whole CPOP issue. And I think the reason I'm bringing it up tonight, because I've heard some comments made about how we, not necessarily just on your part, but also on some of the commissioners' part, about improving relations between the community and police. Also about whether there are people within our community who might be interested, in applying for the police academy. I hear all of this, and then I wonder if there is a process through the kind of interactions that police will have with community, definitely through the CPOP process that's in place, that could help both the community and the police to begin to talk to each other, to begin to work together, to begin to lessen some of that tension that exists within our community. But on the same page, that kind of beginning at the very basic level could even help maybe the community understand the need for new police officers and maybe encourage some of our own residents to apply with positive interactions that happen before any crisis situation occurs.
We agree.
It was more of a comment because we had a lot of
discussion.
discussion.
A smile and a wave.
We had a lot of discussion about CPOP and whether a lot of those interactions are being recorded by the police when they occur in the community, especially when they occur among officers, like at public meetings or whatever, whether those incidents are reported in the form that you require and that you hear, and that's added to the data that we look at when you look at the number of interactions between police and community. So it was more a comment, but it's something I want you to think about, in terms of how we can use CPOP interactions to improve those relations between public and police.
Commissioner Adams.
I'm going to yield my question to Jason Goodrick.
We'll go back to the question. Since we're on arbitration, and we had intended to have the city's labor law attorney come here prior to you being here so they can give a background on that. So arbitration, for those watching that don't know, is after discipline is adjudicated. It's a grievance procedure where the union and the city agrees to have a professional who is certified as an arbitrator look at it and then make a final determination on whether that discipline should stand or be overturned or reduced. So that being said, can you, because this comes up all the time, can you guys explain, because every case doesn't go to arbitration, right? So can you kind of give the commissioners and the public a background on what your decision-making line is for when you decide to go to arbitration?
So we do.
You guys do 3-1 for the arbitration. I'll let you handle that, Jeff.
So we have a lot of grievances. The grievance process for us goes to the chief's level, to the safety, the next step is the safety director's level, and then it goes to human resources. Every officer or detective has the right to file a grievance. The union or the E-board has the right to choose if it's going to arbitration. Fortunately, I've been doing this for a long time. I know my wins, I know my loss. I think I have it figured out what arbitrators are looking for. You know, so we look at all the facts as it's presented to us. We look to see what has been done in the past to other officers. And that could be going back 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 years. And we want to make sure it's done fairly. If we don't believe it's done fairly or the facts are not correct the way the city is seeing it, then that's when we go to arbitration. That's how we make our decisions. You know, probably 1 out of 10 to 15 grievances go to arbitration, somewhere around there. Mostly all the terminations go to grievances or arbitrations. There's been a couple that we have not arbitrated. But that's pretty much the decision. You know, it's our position that when we put a grievance in, it's usually rubber stamped from place to place to place, from the chief to the safety director to human resources. You would very rarely find human resources reversing any decision from the safety director or the chief. So that's why we choose to go to arbitration, because we have a person that's not involved in the politics of Cleveland. They just look at the facts, the rules that have been applied, the facts of the case, and what's been done in the past. So we put a lot of things into it if we're going to go to arbitration, because they are getting more expensive and they are costly. As we're losing members, we got to watch our budget.
I can't add anything better than that.
Commissioner Adams.
Thank you. I just have a couple questions about, I guess, the staffing. Clearly, you're aware of the challenges that you're facing, but I just wanted, just for clarity, at a previous meeting with the police, we were told that there were around 1,300 police officers, and now, so this 900 number, is this anticipating retirements and things like that? I'm just trying to figure out that there's like a big discrepancy between being told 1,300 a few months ago and 900 now. So I'm just trying to figure out what the actual numbers are and why there's such a big gap.
Whoops, I'll get the numbers for you in a second.
Okay.
Just a little stat, though, breaking down. We had a meeting with the deputy chief about a month ago. Officers, they can retire at 25 years, and then they can go into drop for 8 years. Officers that had over 25 years were 286 officers. At our credit union, there's a young lady that does some of these pensions, and we were told she had at least 100, 120 going up to June that's going to get ready to retire. Between 21 and 24 years, I believe it was like 180 officers. And then between 17 and 20 years, there's actually no officers because there was nobody hired really during the COVID times. Going 17 or 15 down below, I think the number was like 850, 860, something like that. So the number might be, Yeah, we have 999 patrol officers right now. Yeah. And like I said, more and more retiring. I mean, obviously, we just got a raise in April. A lot of officers left after they got that percentage raise. So that 900, I'm sure we're going below that.
And then I just wanted to follow up really quickly. I know that in reading the contract for the salaried officers, I just wanted to, clearly there's, this is just not an issue facing Cleveland in terms of the shortage of officers. So, no one's attacking you on that. But the reality is that it is a challenge, right? For you all, it's a challenge, which makes it a challenge for the community, which makes it, it's just a challenge for everybody that we all kind of have to deal with, the fact that we have a shortage. But I did want to ask you if you could clarify, well, one, you said 999 patrol officers. So does that mean that there are other officers who are not patrol officers who are not included in that 999? That's my first question. And then my follow-up is, I wanted to know if you could talk about these, the transferring system that is written in the contract with the salaried employees. I just want to make sure I'm clear about it. I just want to know if that is being employed, the ability to kind of transfer people. I'm talking about this on page 40 of the contract for the salaried employees. It says district basic patrol transfers. And it states that 1/2 of all transfer to districts, including district-to-district transfers in the uniform patrol section, shall be at the whole discretion of the chief of police, regardless of any written request, and not subject to grievance arbitration provisions of this contract. So I guess the question that I'm getting at is this transfer thing that the authority that's written here, and if I'm incorrect, please correct me, is that something that's either already happening, or is that something that is being considered, seeming that, as we're looking at the fact that there's a shortage of people who could be on the street? So I just wanted to know if there's anything happening with the transfer authority that is written in your contract.
So I can maybe clarify both of those. One of them more on behalf of this of Jeff, but the 999 number that Jeff cited, the 900 that we believe we're going to be at, is patrol officers. On top of that, you do have your supervisors, the 213, 57 lieutenants, 18 captains. That may not be, that's not in the 900 number that you have. So total, but as far as who's responding for calls, that's where we're really going to be short. We're short sergeants, we're short lieutenants, captains, but the officers on the street is the real concern, because when they're not coming in the back end of the job, then we can't promote, right? You can't take when you don't have. So that builds up a whole nother problem. So us being two different organizations, those are two different issues that we have to deal with internally. So that might clarify the numbers, or part of the numbers question for you. The transfers, that's strictly when the chief's office decides that it's time to shift people around, the inter-district transfers. There was a portion of my career I worked in field operations, and we would regularly, every 6 months or so, the deputy chief would have us do an analysis. I hate using that word, but that's used a lot in the police department. Analysis of staffing. Do we need to shift people around? And when we did, we would have to abide by that contract. So in other words, the chief has every he has 100% choice in one, and the other one is by seniority, if that's what the language is. Jeff, is that pretty right?
Yeah.
Does that answer?
It explains, but I want to know if transfers are happening.
That's completely up. That's the chief's management right as to when he or she decides that it's time to shuffle people around.
Because it seems like you guys are speaking about an emergency, so it would feel like it would, maybe we should
that's not
consider
transferring people into the police department. That's taking somebody from the 5th district to the 1st district or the 2nd district or 3rd district. It's within the division, the transfers. So if somebody looks at it, let's say a lieutenant, a staffing lieutenant in field ops looks at it and says, hey, we are way too heavy in this district than the other one. Maybe it's time to shuffle the deck a little bit. That's how it's done. They have to abide by that contract. So it's not transferring people in. It's what do we have within here, and then do we need to balance the ship sometime? And that decision is made at the chief's level as to when to do that.
Okay, so
we could call and say, Chief, we need people shifted, but they're not going to necessarily do it.
I feel like it just seems like an emergency. So if I were a person who had the authority, I would want more people on the streets, just considering that.
No, I see what you're saying, but it's more a management decision than a union decision.
Yeah, and remember, there's just more services than just on the streets. You know, you have detectives to follow up to get the cases into court. You have traffic units doing all these events downtown. I mean, there's just, everybody's short. There's a sex crimes, there's a homicide unit, there's a domestic violence. So in theory, yes, hey, we're short on patrol, we need to get everybody out, but all these other jobs are just important because they are all overloaded with cases and there's just nowhere to pull from. I mean, these units, we talk about patrol all the time, but they're 20, 30, 40 cases behind already. And they're trying to stay above water, getting the cases to court to prosecute people that are, getting arrested. So we talk about patrol, but the bureaus and everybody else that are doing all these cases, they're just as swamped and they're getting killed just like everybody else.
Thank you. We will have the order of Commissioner Benito, Chair Jan, and Commissioner Pete. Commissioner Benito?
Thank you. I have two questions. The first is, and I think you can speak to this from your organization or also just about police unions in general, is I think that we can all see that there's a real fracture in trust between police and the community. Maybe not across the board, but especially in communities that have been marginalized. And I'm curious to hear from your perspective, do you think that there's anything that police unions could have done better to build that bridge between police and the community? And what do you think the role of police unions is, or, and especially in your organizations, is to build that bridge and to improve things?
Just for the record, we have two all-star pitchers on this team. I don't know if I can speak for historical issues. Although I have been on the FOP board for a number of years, there's a history going way back, as I stated. So I don't know what happened in 1960 or 1950 or whatever it might be. I think first and foremost, I said support and advocate. We're no different in maybe the mission for the division. Through training, the community outreach aspect of it. Years ago, some officers I worked with in the 3rd District would make fun of me because I would get out and play baseball or basketball with the kids, and we had time to do that, But that was community outreach at that time, right? We don't have that opportunity now because of the runs. You're going from run to run. From a union standpoint, I think, I would not call a building putting a wall up or anything like that. There may be things we disagree with the way that it's gone about, but part of the problem may have been that whoever was in charge at that time was so vocal about whatever the situation might be that we're taking a stance against this. Well, things change, people develop, everybody has a different personality. I don't know, but we can certainly go along with advocating and trying to get the officers to have buy-in. That's a catchphrase that everybody uses, buy-in. If I believe it, I'm going to support it. If I don't believe it, I'm going to tell you why I don't support it. We don't have to agree with it, but I'm going to tell you why. So to me, training is probably the first thing, but from a union standpoint, advocating the changes that need to be made. I've been around a long time. I know changes need to be made within this police department, but they didn't just start when I walked in the door almost 27 years ago. These are things that have been going on in society for years. So I welcome change. I welcome the support of the community. I welcome the support of the commission. I want people to come in and go, where do I sign up for being a policeman? Not, hey, I just filed an application in some suburb. You know what I mean? I hope it doesn't dance too much around it, but that's my answer. So thank you. Swing and a miss.
Yeah. My job is to protect the officers' rights. It's not always pretty. It's not always agreed upon. But you took pride to make sure everything was factually correct out there. Not everybody agreed, and I always made myself available to go talk one-on-one or talk whatever from east to west to relay the facts of what's going on. So we've been open to talk to whoever. I, have no problems talking to anybody. But the job is to protect our officers' rights. And that's the bottom line. And like I said, it's not always pretty, but on my half, it's always factual. And that's pretty much it.
Thank you. And my second question, I'm a social worker. I'm a licensed social worker, and one of the things is Commissioner Scher and I, have swapped things we've seen in our field. We've seen some hard stuff as a police officer and a social worker, and I'm acutely aware of the really hard things that our police officers see, that they walk into, the stress and the trauma that officers are exposed to. And that's one of my goals as a commissioner, is really looking at how do we create a division that helps mitigate the impact of that trauma, because not only is it harmful to the police officers, but it makes it harder to have constitutional and bias-free policing if officers are reacting from a place of trauma and escalation. One of the things that I've been thinking about when you're talking about officers having these 16, 18-hour days, and as we're dealing with the staffing levels, is that is a lot of trauma exposure. And when you're increasing those hours, right, it just compounds the type of trauma exposure that you're seeing. I would love to hear from you what your thoughts on what we can do, and I guess I'm doing the royal we of the city, of the commission, of what you see the needs are to, obviously, improving staffing will reduce some of that, right? And so I think we've all talked about that, but with the current situation we have, what do you think are things that you would like to see in order to help protect the mental health of our officers, to help mitigate the very real trauma and stress that they experience in their jobs?
I think if everybody, I don't know if you met our employees assistance unit, but they are actually amazing. They do a great job. The only thing I would ask, as you do this and you go through this, instead of discipline all the time, if there's early signs that an officer has something going on, to try to figure an alternative way to help them, stuff like that. Sometimes these early signs are ignored and just go right into discipline. So on our behalf, we'd more like to see, hey, what can we do with this officer? Right now, he's getting himself in a little bit of trouble. He's been doing 10, 15, 20 years in the 4th District, 2nd District, on nights, working 16, 20 hours a day. Is there a break system that we can do for him? So hopefully there would be something that can be figured out, that we recognize a problem and figure out an alternative solution instead of discipline.
I mirror what Jeff said. The employee assistance unit that the Cleveland Police have is an outstanding unit. They could use more officers. I don't know what training they've received to get to where they're at, but I know that there's veterans in there that help veterans, and there's, they even have a canine that's just like a support canine that they're able to take out and help. So, consistently supporting, those types of units within a division. The mental health doctor, Dr. Franklin, correct? Right, Dr. Franklin, that's always there and available for our officers. These are additional, but I don't know, does she need support? Is she overwhelmed that maybe the division needs to think about taking on an additional stress counselor? And I'm sure the employee assistance unit would welcome additional officers if we had them to give. But they're probably our biggest asset when it comes to the stress and the dealing. And again, going back to the union's job, what is it? Part of it is, like I said at the very beginning, the supporting and advocating for our members. And supporting might be talking to somebody who's having a rough marriage. I'm not a marriage counselor, but I can maybe help that person get in touch with the right people that they need to talk to or she needs to talk to. So I hope that answers.
Thank you. So we have Chair Ridgeway, and then Commissioner Pete will give the final question.
My question is actually to you.
Oh, to me?
Okay, so you go. You go.
To me, huh? Okay, so actually it's a comment. I want to thank you both and the fellow officers who are here for coming out tonight and being responsive to our questions. I also want to say to Detective Follmer that You gave us a mini arbitration course when you answered that a few minutes ago, and you shared your wins and your losses. The only thing you failed to give us was the strategy for those wins, so that we would know what we need to look out for when we meet you at the table, or the losses, what you didn't do, for those losses, so we would also be aware of that as well and use that to our advantage. But thank you very much.
Commissioner Pete.
So yeah, my question is to the co-chairs and Director Goodrick. Since we live in this, this police force is a third black and brown officers in the city. That's 2/3 black and brown. I was wondering if we could, at some point in the near future, invite the Black Shield to come talk to us. That's my request.
Through the chairs to the commissioner, that was added officially by the training committee, but you can see that bringing everyone here in one day would be overwhelming. So we're going to bring the Black Shield and Hispanic Officers Association at a future date.
So thank you. Oh.
I just wanted to say thank you, on behalf of the Fraternal Police. I'm sure I can mirror Jeff. I don't want to speak for him, but thank you for the opportunity to come and meeting with you and having this dialogue. And we look forward to the future. We may not agree with everything down the line, but we'll work it out one way or another.
Thank you. I believe your attendance is a true testament to your dedication to approve the conditions of the police department to ensure constitutional policing that is fair for officers and residents to create a safer Cleveland. So the next portion of the meeting is reports. The first report would be the Executive Director report by Mr. Goodrick. Can we take one question? A few.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So it's a little bit confusing in terms of who ends up coming as guests to these meetings. Sometimes, as far as I want to make sure that I'm asking this question to the right people, which I might not be. So we'll keep that in mind. Testing? Okay. All right. There are two things, just two things that are large and we probably won't have time for. So the one is that you had mentioned that there are improvements that you do think that could be made to the police force. And I was just wondering, from your perspective, what those might be. And the other question has to do with recruitment. And again, this is the one I'm not really sure if this is for you guys, but I'm curious kind of what the setup is now for how you are going about how you're going about recruiting, and obviously it's such a significant issue. I'm wondering what the game plan is. Do you have a plan for hiring a consultant, or do you have like regular meetings where you are working on this or strategizing, or kind of practically speaking, what is the plan that we have to address it, because it's obviously such a significant issue. Thank you, and I appreciate it.
Just I'll answer recruitment. Recruitment's all based, pretty much on the administration, safety director, and we have a group that in personnel that goes out and try to recruit. A couple of stats, though. I think you should know that we have only 15 people graduating in this academy class. And then for the next academy class going in, they only have 10 people. I do want to throw that stat out there. So, but it is on the city to recruit. Nobody is, we're in disagreements a lot, but everybody is doing the best they can to get whoever they can in these uniforms right now, as long as they qualify. So everybody's trying their hardest. Unfortunately, like it's been said out here, it's a national problem. But we'll take anybody. You're 21 and over, and you have no significant background, and you have your high school education, you can be a police officer. And our academy classes our staff are amazing. They'll make you into a police officer. I'm sure he can say, and it's rough right now, but it is still a good job, and the officers are making their money out there. So, but to answer your question, it goes back on the administration and just strategies to try to figure out how to get people.
And maybe so your first question doesn't skipped or passed over. The change that could be made, I'm sure if I sat down, I could come up with a list of what I think is important. What I can tell you is when I started, when Jeff started, when the retired Sarge started, we had stop signs welded in place on cars we drove. And in the wintertime, water and slush would come up. It wasn't uncommon. So the division has made great strides in vehicles, in equipment. We didn't have computers in our cars when we worked a zone car. Sometimes we had one radio. Now everybody has a radio to go home. So the things that I would have thought would make for the better are happening. We need to make sure that the city continues to do that. That's another way that they're supporting our officers, and we need to ensure that they're doing that, are those positive changes. It's kind of like, nobody wants to go home to a dirty house, right? The same thing. Nobody wants to go into a dirty car or a car that has a stop sign welded in place. You work better, you feel better about yourself when you're in a good environment. I think it's a fair statement. Things are getting better. They could probably always get better. But that's maybe answer your question a little bit on the front side. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. So the next item of business is the Executive Director's Report by Jason Goodrick.
All right, good evening. Just a few quick updates for commissioners on operational things, which is typically a standard practice that we're going to start having, I believe. And then also, as we get going, things will happen in a consent decree and stuff like this, so we just time to just inform commissioners and the public what the staff is aware of that's happening in the broader scheme of the consent decree and police reforming issues. So starting with updates on staffing, we are a few weeks away from posting the vacant office manager and finance manager position. I've been talking to HR for about 2 to 3 weeks on how to move that forward. The rec has been signed. It's going through the city approval process. So we'll finally be able to do that. And what that means for us is more expedient processing of our own purchasing in the future and handling our own accounting, whereas before we were on kind of we had people on loan who were assisting us from public safety. So looking forward to that finally. We've also requested job description updates since 115 came in for one of the project coordinator positions. This is what I talked about before with equity and equality in the staff. So we have 3 project coordinators, and there's some disparity there. So one of them, the plan is to adjust the pay and add senior to the working title. And that is for the current position of Sarah Anderson, who's served for 4 years. And then the other plan is to revise the job description that I currently am and remove executive director from it, make it an assistant director that would remain an administrative manager under civil service. And we will probably be selecting, if all goes well, when that position is redone and vacant, Shalana Williams to that position interim. So that is the current plan, barring any civil service issues or legal roadblocks, procedure roadblocks at the city. Those things have been started as well. We also have a capital budget to move our office. It's been 2 years in the waiting to find a new location, and now that you're here, we are going to begin that. I think that was mentioned. So we have about $50,000 that we spend a year that's budgeted to for our rent and our space, plus an additional 40-some thousand in a capital project account waiting to go. So I've also contacted the city to begin that process as well. So I'll give you updates as it goes, and there will be a presentation as we get to some final selections. But a lot of it's just logistics. So until we get to that point, I'll just keep you updated how it's going. So that's the operational stuff at the moment. Some big happenings in the consent decree world since we last met. There has been a new monitor appointed. It's Carl Racine, who some of you met when you went to the presentations from the city when the 2 final candidates came. And Mr. Racine brings with him, I guess, a 4-person team, him being one of them, and they are looking at recruiting some of the local monitoring team. But they are here, they are official, and the firm is Hogan Lovells, and they're out of London. So that's who we're contracted through, and that's the representative, the lead monitor is Carl Racine. Speaking of monitors, so that means that Aisha Bell Hardaway, you've all met, is in transition right now from past interim monitor. But there is a consent decree requirement that the monitor appears before the commission and discusses the semi-annual reports that come out. Ms. Hardaway has agreed on May 10th to continue that tradition and meet the requirement of the consent decree. So on May 10th, we will hear from previous interim monitor Aisha Bell Hardaway to present to the public and the commission the 12th semi-annual report. And you'll be able to ask questions directly to her about how they came to that. So the other happening in the consent decree world is you may have seen an email from me if you've been checking. Interim Monitor Hardaway submitted a special report regarding an officer-involved shooting that happened in 2020. So what they did was they went back and did an audit of that investigation. You may have heard some of this in the news and some of it in the courtroom at the last presentation to Judge Oliver. And the report had some findings that that particular investigation did not meet the standards set out in the consent decree or the current policy at the time. I encourage every commissioner to read this report. And the major reason is because the DOJ and the consent decree and the monitors are going to go away. And this is what the citizens expect of this commission to be able to do on its own in the future, is an audit and an oversight report at this level. So the takeaway from this report is it's pretty much a gold standard for where we should be, in the near future, maybe in this term, to be able to get ourselves trained, ready, and equipped to produce a report that is a factual investigation that's very in-depth, that's based in policy in place at the time. So, all the discipline that you're going to see, all the audits that we do, we can't project what should be or could have been. What we have to do is measure it against what the division had in place at the time. So that's the important thing about Aisha's report here, is that it was measuring the performance against what the division said itself and the city said the division would do at the time. So the other part of it, it's reasonable and evidence-based conclusions. So there's no rhetoric in it. It's a strict report. And then it has, for us, when we do something like this, there'll be a collaborative action plan. So we have power. The monitor doesn't have power to say, you will do this. The court does, right? And that's what the consent decree is already doing. But the difference is in the future, we will inherit the power to not only create a report, but also implement anything that we want, any action that we want in our purview of power after that report. But I suggest that we do that collaboratively. So hopefully when we do these things, we audit, we'll work with the division and then have an evaluation plan. So please read this. Get familiar with it, because again, this is the expectation of the citizens for us to be able to do independently without DOJ or monitor intervention. Thank you, chairs. That's all I have for today.
Executive Director, do you plan to make a quick report on our meeting this morning with the safety committee?
Oh, yeah, council. How did I forget
Yes.
council?
Yeah.
So, yes, that actually was probably on my next page here. I just didn't flip it. So we were asked to appear this morning. The co-chairs were there along with myself to just kind of go over what we've achieved in the last several months. I think one of the key takeaways from that is council, there's definitely some misinformation about 115 out there, right? And there is a fear factor about, and we've heard this going back to when it was an issue, before it was a charter, in the charter, was we would have power without oversight. So I think the biggest part of the discussion today was trying to reassure council that, they do have oversight of us, right? We're already looking at, we don't have unlimited purchase power. We can't break city law. We can't, for us who are staffs, we can't go outside the city policy that guides staff. So I think I could still see there's this little bit of fear about unchecked power outside of all branches of government by this commission. So we try to do our best to just alleviate that and let them know that, we are working within the law, and for the staff, we are working within the city's policy. So while we do have more power than has ever been given to a civilian board related to policing in the city, by no means are we, as a collective group, trying to go outside the city charter. So I think that was the gist of the conversation. They asked about the staffing and where we're at with the budget for that. And so we gave them progress updates on their training as well, creation of the bylaws. But they have made it clear that we will be returning on a regular basis to provide updates, and that they would like to keep close oversight of us while we have oversight of the police.
Thank you so much. We will hear the report of the Internal Training Committee given by the current chair that's here, Commissioner Earley.
Good evening. To date, our commission has had close to 40 hours of training. We have done 4 hours of orientation, about 20 hours of legal and general policing orders, and then 4 to 5 hours of miscellaneous presentations and trainings to date. Our next training date will be May 10th, where we will be meeting with the monitoring team and being trained on what their procedures and policies and work has been when it comes to the consent decree. And that is all that the training committee has at this moment.
Thank you. You want to ask a question?
Yes, is firearm training part of the schedule? Because that was one of the things that came up in council meeting this morning. The chair of the safety committee felt very strongly that this commission should take firearm training.
We have not discussed that, but I'm all for it. I'm definitely all for it. I will bring it to our co-chair, and then we can take it from there. No problem.
Thank you. We will hear the report of the budget and grants given by Commissioner Pete Van Leer.
Okay, thank you. So the Budget and Grants Committee was working a lot on the grant program and getting that up and running, and delegated work to a working group of myself and Commissioner Zayed, along with staff. And so what we've done, we met, I believe it was last week, and we finalized a website landing page language over the past week. The online grant application and a scoring sheet, and proposed the grant deadline that we're proposing for launching it is May 15th, with an application deadline of July 1st, and plan for October disbursement of funds. We're still working on finalizing in the working group, the promotional materials and workshops to the community, and looking at translation services of the documents that we'll be putting out to the public.
Thank you so much. So now we will hear the report of the Rules Committee given by Commissioner Benito as well as Commissioner Zayed.
All right. Good evening. So the Rules Committee met to continue our review of our second Rules and Procedures package. We met on Thursday, April 20th, and we had the opportunity to meet with Prosecutor Jordan from the City of Cleveland, who continued to give us some information about Brady, Giglio, and Garret, and we had some conversation also about how we will work with the city in the work that we have been given through Charter 115 around maintaining Brady Giglio database. So we had some good conversations with her. We will be hearing on our next meeting, which will be on Thursday, May 4th at 6 p.m. Just a small note that we are moving the meeting. Normally we meet 5 to 7, but in order to make it more accessible for some members of the community, we're moving the meeting to 6 to 8 on May 4th, and we will be having some civil rights defense attorneys that will be joining us then. We also continue discussion of the draft administrative procedures, section 2.8, which is about public speaking, commentary, and media relations, to have some conversation around the concerns that were brought up in the past commission meeting where Section 2.8 was sent back to committee. We are still continuing conversation about that, and so that will be continued on Thursday, May 4th at 6 p.m. as well. It has been requested that if any commissioners have any further comments or concerns about that policy, Section 2.8, that they reach out to Chair Wong, but also I would add that commissioners can reach out to any member of the Rules Committee as well, and we can certainly bring those comments. And then also we would definitely encourage any commissioners to join us for the May 4th meeting. And I think that's all. Thank you.
Commissioner Said.
Okay, so this message is from Commissioner Wong. She's the chair of the Rules Committee, and it is, she is saying, I apologize for my absence tonight. I am currently on my way to OSU to check my sick cat into the ER. As the chair of the Rules Committee, I would like to like the record to reflect that the guidelines for public comment included in tonight's agenda were not presented nor deliberated upon in any prior Rules Committee meeting. They are, to my understanding, the creation of the co-chairs without input from the rest of the commission. Considering the importance of the public and the community in our work, I am requesting that these guidelines be further refined in the Rules Committee for future publication and application.
Thank you so much for your comment. I would like to say it was a decision that was presented in a meeting between the co-chairs as well as executive director, who provided guidance under a variety of concerns. One, that when presenters come, we do not want them to feel attacked, because we're here learning information to ensure that we fulfill our charge, right? That we was do our due diligence. One, two, to ensure that commissioners have the ability to provide the opportunity to ask questions, and it was provided to a variety of commissioners, the conditions of the meeting, so that information was brought forth. And under Robert Rules of Order, the chair is the presiding officer and has the ability to guide our meetings. It is not in any intention to override anyone's decision as a commission or as the public. As I stated earlier, we value your voice, and in the title, it has Cleveland Community Police Commission. However, in certain instances, to ensure that we receive the information to fulfill our charge, we may have to limit it in certain presentations, and sometimes the presenters may request that. So for example, May 10th, it was the request that there would be no questions from the community. So I wanted to ensure that we provided that clarification and understanding, so that we wanted to ensure that we're transparent and that we are being mindful of how we are presenting ourselves, and that we provide different opportunities to ensure that community voice is heard.
An additional comment, these are not rules, as our bylaws are, and some other rules that have been fully approved by the commission as a whole. These are guidelines, so we do have an opportunity to flex them when needed, which is totally unlike bylaws and some of the other rules that have been brought to the full commission for approval.
Thank you so much. So to proceed with the meeting, we will hear the report of the hiring committee given by Chair Donaldson.
All right, good evening. So I actually have a report today. So yay. Couple of things I want to discuss, so bear with me as I go through this, commissioners and the public. First thing, I just want to talk about the hiring committee. So the hiring committee was established at our first full meeting as the new commission, and there were 8 people, including myself, who expressed interest in being part of that committee. I felt as the chair that we needed to focus first on establishing our rules and then also ensuring that training was completed. So I decided to kind of hold off on the process of the hiring committee actually meeting. And then we established our bylaws, which said that only 3 to 5 members could be on the committee, which with it being 8, I knew that we were going to have to reduce that number anyway at some point. So saying all that to say that I have followed up with all of the people who expressed interest on being a part of the committee, except John, we'll talk later. And I made the decision that based on their responses that I'll continue to be the co-chair, and then Commissioner Benito, Commissioner Van Leer will be on the committee as well. So there's 3 of us. Keep in mind that there will be a link sent out at some point where commissioners will be able to express their interest in other committees. So if there are commissioners who would like to be on that hiring committee, please indicate when you get that link. But also keep in mind that there can only be 3 to 5 members on the committee. So just want to talk about that, and then also say that, of course, the role of the hiring committee is to establish a process to recommend for appointment someone for the executive director position. So the role of our committee is not to select who that person is going to be. We're just here to figure out what the process is going to look like. So interview guides, interview process, making sure that, you know, whoever applies for the position goes through some sort of process in order to be recommended for appointment. Speaking of, our current interim executive director, Jason, has been waiting on his swearing in process, and there were some concerns that with him not being sworn in yet, that could potentially lead to delays in other things that he needs to do as the interim executive director. But I can report that I spoke with Delonte Thomas with the city of Cleveland, and he told me that he emailed Jason about his swearing in, and Jason confirmed that he did receive the email, so that it should be happening next week as far as Jason being officially sworn in as the interim executive director for the commission. And I do understand the concerns about the limbo. We established Jason as the interim executive director at our first meeting at the end of January. It is now the end of April. He still hasn't been sworn in. So it's my hope that he will actually be sworn in next week, and I will stay on top of that with Delonte with the city of Cleveland. The other thing I want to just point out is that one of the things that Delonte shared with me was that when we made Jason our interim executive director, we did not specify a timeline. So looking back on it, we didn't have a timeline in that appointment. So the city would like for us to specify a timeline for Jason to be the interim executive director so that when he is sworn in, that everyone has an idea of how long that will be. So as the hiring committee, I want to make sure that we can do that, but we're also working parallel with establishing a process for how we are going to fill that role. And I also want to say, you know, at this moment that Jason and I have had a conversation, and I did, of course, express to Jason that I would think he would be open to applying for that position. So I want to make that public that Jason will be applying to the position if he chooses to. So say that to say, in order to specify the timeline, in order to get things moving, getting the process going in the right direction, I do want to put forth a motion to appoint Jason Goodrick as the interim executive director for the Cleveland Community Police Commission until an executive director is recommended for appointment by the Cleveland Community Police Commission and sworn in by the City of Cleveland, or until April 26, 2024, whichever comes first. During the interim period, Jason will assume the executive director duties and responsibilities as outlined in Section 115. Additionally, the Cleveland Community Police Commission's hiring committee will initiate a transparent and community-involved recruitment process that will include posting, searching for, and interviewing applicants for the role of the executive director for the Cleveland Community Police Commission position.
We need a second. Let me. Is there a second?
I second.
So the question is on the adoption to officially recognize as the executive director for the Cleveland Police Commission until the position is filled, or until April 26th, whichever comes first, for a transparent process which includes the community with posting, searching, and the rest of the duties. Does the maker of the motion want the floor?
I was just going to say I can reread it if you all want me to.
Would we like it to be reread?
All right, we're good.
Any further discussion or questions at this time? Commissioner Earley?
I would just like to say to us as a commission that I think it's important to follow this motion and support it, not only for the sake of us being able to do business on a day-to-day basis, but also for the sake of job security. It's tough for anybody to come to work and produce on a daily basis if they don't know they're going to have a job. And so for Jason and the staff, whether this is an interim period for a year or less, at least they know that as they support us, we will support them. So to my fellow commissioners, I support this motion and would ask that you would as well.
Any other further discussion or questions at this time? Commissioner Donaldson?
Yes, I just want to add that it is also my idea that the hiring committee will have its first meeting at some point in May. So I just want to put that on record and clarify that our process for determining who the executive director will be or making a recommendation for appointment of an executive director will also start soon and will be a parallel process that will happen as Jason is serving as interim executive director.
Okay. Any other just questions or debate at this time? Hence none. The question is on the adoption to officially recognize Jason Goodrick as the executive director of the Cleveland Police Commission for the time frame that was established and to ensure a community process. A roll call vote will be conducted. Commissioner Adams?
Aye.
Commissioner Benito?
Aye.
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 Commissioner Earley?
Aye.
Commissioner Reeves?
Aye.
Chair Ridgeway?
Aye.
Commissioner Pete Van Leer?
Aye.
Commissioner Zayed?
Aye.
Commissioner Rodriguez? Aye. Motion carried. Any other further business from the hiring committee at this time?
No more business at this point, thank you.
Hence none. The next portion of the meeting is old business, and it will be facilitated by Chair Ridgeway. I'm starting to slow down.
We are still trying to get this co-chair process in place to know who speaks when and who facilitates what, so we'll get there. This is our first night actually functioning as co-chairs, so this is a new process for us. So we didn't have any old business on the agenda. I think what we would have brought to the table as old business, we dealt with with the hiring committee and also the comments that were shared with the rules committee as well. So let's move to new business. One of the things that we had agreed on early in our beginning was that we would conduct 2 meetings a month that would give us the opportunity to bring, to get our training in place, to get all our onboarding processes in place. And so we had said that we would do that for 6 months, and then we would move to 1 meeting a month. So that 1 meeting a month would begin in July. So I just think we need a motion to approve that, even though there was a general agreement that we would move to 1 meeting a month after 6 months of operation.
I raise the motion that we move our meetings in July to once a month.
Okay, so a motion. Oh, go ahead. So a motion that we are anxious to do this.
Hurry up and second that.
Oh, do we need a third? No, I think we're okay. We're okay. So we have a motion on the floor, and it has been seconded that we will move our commission meetings from twice a month to once a month beginning in July. Any questions, any debate on this topic?
To the chair, I just have one question. Are we going to separately set which day of the month that is, or whatever day, or is that separate motion?
The second Wednesday?
I think it's is it the last Wednesday of the month? Fourth Wednesday of the month, yes. Does that work for everybody? It was one of our Wednesday meetings anyway, so it would just go to that one Wednesday a month. Yeah. Okay, so I guess we need a roll call vote on this. And my telephone is lost, so I don't know where it is somewhere, so I'm kind of at a disadvantage here. So, Dr. John Adams.
Aye.
Chandra Benito.
Aye.
James Chura.
Aye.
Charles Donaldson Jr.
Aye.
Pastor Kyle Earley.
Aye.
Gregory Reeves.
Aye.
Pete Van Leer.
Aye.
Audrianna Rodriguez.
Aye.
And Sharina Zayed.
Aye.
And Jan Ridgeway, aye. So the motion carries. The second item on the agenda under new business is to, thank you, I give this back because I will lose it too. The second item on the agenda is the discussion to establish membership to standing committees. During the time that we were rotating our chairs as chair pro tem until we were able to elect our permanent chairs, we established 2 ad hoc committees. One ad hoc committee dealt with getting a slate of commissioners to run for the position of co-chairs. That ad hoc committee has completed its work. The second ad hoc committee was charged with working with Ryan on our staff, was charged with indicating an interest and what committee you wanted to work on. We did not take names. We were just trying to see if we were going to have any conflict, if we had 7 or 8 people vying for the same committee or not, and whether there were enough people interested in each of the committees. At that point, we had not established the 4 new committees that were mentioned earlier. I think 3 or 4 police related, plus the community engagement. So at this point, we are ready, I believe, to establish those committees. And so to do that, because we were just, the ad hoc was an advisory only, at this point, we would need a motion to move forward in establishing those committees. Ryan will do sort of a doodle document that will go out to each of our commissioners where you can actually state which of these committees you want to serve on. We're looking for about no more than 5 committee members per committee. And so by the May meeting, we should be able to finalize the composition of those committees. So we are asking for a motion to move forward and finalize the membership of the standing committees, while at the same time alerting all the commissioners that they need to be aware that that doodle document is coming out, so you can indicate what committees you want to serve on. So do I have a motion?
I move to begin the process to do formal committee selection. Is that the request?
Yes. That
Okay,
sounds
great.
good to me.
I second.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second on the floor that we move forward in finalizing the membership of our standing committees. Any question or debate? Yes.
Let's just say discussion.
Discussion, okay.
Just for clarity, I'm reminded of a doodle form that we did before that highlighted which committees we want to sit on. Is this the same or is this a different one?
It's the same committees that are listed, but before we did not attach names to those committees. It was just, are
anonymous.
you interested?
Understood.
So we could kind of gauge where the competition might be. Wanted to make sure we didn't have 0 on rules and everybody else on police policy, for instance. So now is the opportunity where you can actually sign up for one of those committees. Okay, so we have any other questions, debate, discussion? Yes.
I have 2 questions, and the first one I should know the answer to since I'm on the Rules Committee. So I apologize, but can you remind me what the guidelines were? Was there a minimum amount of committees we had to serve on, and is there a maximum? And then I'll ask my second question after.
The rule that was approved was that each committee would have no less than 3 members and no more than 5. So you can serve, I think the way, and Ryan, you may want to add to this discussion, but I think the way that it washed out was that most of us could actually, we can't serve on a committee as co-chairs, so that created a little bit of room for other people. But I think it washed out where each commissioner could serve on 2 committees. Right. Thank you for that.
Assuming no one's opinion has changed, the intervening.
So it has changed?
I said, please don't.
Any other, you had another question?
Yes, thank you. The second question was, have we decided when the police policy, police training, and police discipline committees will open or begin business?
These committees will be part of this process now. What we were waiting on before was for the commissioners to get some training so that you would know what would be involved, and I think we are moving forward in that direction. And so those committees will be part of the process.
It is anticipated that around July, after the training, that we may be able to start that work. Also, it is recommended that some of your first steps will be, this is a lot of work, really narrow in on what the committee would like to focus on to help create a strategic plan that can really outline as a whole how we're going to move forward and present that information to the community, as well as start understanding the budget, because that's going to come pretty soon.
There's another comment that came to mind, but I've lost it. Been a long day. Any other discussion, question? No, let's call for the vote. You want to read them? Read the names out, yeah.
Sure. Commissioner Adams?
Aye.
Commissioner Benito?
Aye.
Commissioner Shara?
Aye.
Commissioner Donaldson?
Aye.
Commissioner Earley?
Aye.
Commissioner Reeves?
Aye.
Chair Ridgeway?
Aye.
Commissioner Pete Van Leer?
Aye.
Commissioner Zayed?
Aye.
Commissioner Rodriguez? Aye.
So the motion passes. I would just, admonish everyone to pay attention to our email and make sure we see any correspondence that coming from Staff Member Ryan, and make sure that you indicate the committees that you want to serve on. The comment that evaded me before is that once these committees are in place, the committees will select their own chairs. So those committees would be in place, and then the committee will select who you want to lead you within each committee. So do we have any other new business that's not on the agenda? We are about 15 minutes ahead of our scheduled adjournment. I think we have always said that if we had time and we completed our formal agenda early, that we would open it back up to the audience if you had any other public comments that you want to share. Understanding that during the course of the meeting, something may have come up that you weren't privy to as we began the meeting, and so now would be your opportunity to share whatever public comment you have. So it's open for public comment now. Yes.
To the chair, I don't mean to be hasty. I have a very serious family situation, and I would like to be excused if we're not adjourning right now.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
And thank you. So if we don't have anyone else, or we had someone, oh, please.
Hi, I'm Kayla. Can you hear me? Hi. Yeah, okay. Something I just wanted to say, which I don't have a solution for, so take it for what it is that it seems like at times, like I can make a comment before the meeting, then things arise, and then decisions are like actively being made, and there doesn't seem like an opportunity for myself or necessarily a community member to give input, which I understand it's in many ways that is your job to then do that part. But then it almost seems kind of useless to say it afterward, like now. It feels annoying, maybe. No, I mean, because it's useless, right? It's helpful, I suppose, for me emotionally to express my emotions, but like it doesn't really help in terms of like the decision-making process. So again, I don't have a great suggestion on this one, but just noting that it's happened a couple times that I will feel like I want to, maybe put a comment in, but the opportunity isn't there, and then we're done, and I'm like, I don't want to waste anybody's time with an opinion after the fact. So just throwing that out there, but yeah, thank you.
Sorry, normally we don't comment, but I would like the community to know that no opinion is ever a waste, and I do not want it to be perceived as that way. We value every concern, every input that you provide, but sometimes, we have to receive the information, especially during this training session.
Thanks to the chair, to the commission. I sort of had a question for the unions. Which I totally understand because I do know the numbers, but given that the numbers are dwindling in the police department and we're not getting the numbers coming in the door, if there was an opportunity from this commission with some ideas to maybe change some things, would the unions be open to maybe relaxing some of the language in those contracts to get those things moving to increase the numbers on the street?
Thank you, and I think that's a very fair question. From a strictest standpoint, I would have to say the contract opens up again every 3 years for negotiation. And here's why I say that. You open the door on one thing, the next thing something else is open and something else, and it snowballs or could snowball from there. So from a strict interpolist idea mindset, that'd be hard to do. But there's always the possibility if the city came to the union with a proposal of some sort of a side letter being created that both unions would agree on that may allow something like that. I'm guessing you're thinking about the, the rumors out there about a possibility of a retired officer coming back or something along those lines. Jeff may be able to speak a little bit better to that because the CPBA deals more with people coming into the police department. By the time they get to the FOP, they're generally more tenured. So we don't have people coming in as sergeants, you know what I mean? But that would be my viewpoint on it is we kind of open a door for one thing, then what's next and down the line, and it weakens the contract that way. And we're here to support the rights that are negotiated on. So, there may be a time where there has to be a wait because that's something that should be brought up in negotiation. Jeff, did I speak out of line, or is that about right in the mindset?
Yeah, I don't like doing like the what ifs, so I mean, I take whatever comes in front of me and I'll bring it to our membership, but we do it every 3 years, and I'm always, you know me, I have an open mind, and it's the best interest in our members, and right now being short is not good, so everybody has to have an open mind right now, and if there was an idea, I would entertain it and take the right channels to see if it would work out for everybody.
Are there any other comments? Yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to say I thought it might be helpful if the two co-chairs could give an update on what took place at today's safety committee meeting. I think it lasted about 3 hours. Mr. Goodrick, I'm sorry, I can't keep track of your title. You were there, and I saw the two co-chairs, and I wasn't able to watch the whole thing, but I thought all of you did a really good job. And then finally, I just want to say, I think it's unprofessional for any commissioner to chastise members in the middle of a meeting when they're not here. And I just wanted to put that out there. It's understandable when residents can't come or commissioners can't come, but people texting or tweeting questions, I don't know if it's appropriate to be addressing that in the meeting. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I just think that's something that could have been discussed internally. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Captain Simon with the Police Department. I just wanted to speak really quickly to a point made by Commissioner Benito regarding trauma in our police officers. The division is very aware of that. My team is currently working on what we call the Officer Intervention Program, where we track traumatic incidents for officers so that we can get ahead of that and get them the help they need before it becomes a bigger problem. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. We're going to, I want to make one last comment before we adjourn. I just want to remind everybody that our agenda is always posted on the commission's website. So you would have an idea of what's going to be on the table before you come to the meeting. And because we do a comment session earlier in the meeting, that would be an opportunity for you to share any comments that you want weighed, during our discussion and action that's taken by the commission. This one at the end is when we have time, and it allows you to respond to anything you heard during the course of the meeting that you didn't have an opportunity to respond to earlier. So we are 5 minutes away. If there are no other comments, we have other, okay.
Sorry about that. Today, it seems like the public comments has become a good topic. And I would like to address one particular issue. For all the meetings from the starting till now, lots of time we do have residents, they come in the meeting when the meeting already started, maybe not even half of the way or whatever, but in that case, presentation or some reports are already ongoing. And so the second part is good to have, because if they have something to say, but they didn't come at the beginning since they cannot, then they will still have a chance to raise their voice, especially from July. The public meeting like this kind of a setting will be only once a month, then I really wish we can have the second session. Yes, some of the things throughout the meeting, you will actually already voted on that, but there are always new issues. Because if we don't keep doing this, the people in the community would not really see anything to motivate themselves to come out to talk. Retaliation is real. It doesn't matter you're a whistleblower in the police force or you are a whistleblower in the community. If we want all the communication channel to be open in order to have a friendly talk in the community, that also helps the commission to do the job, then I believe having public comment sections in each meeting is still good. Of course, the second one would not be as formal as the first one. That we can understand. But still, we wish all the changes can be discussed while we are in the meeting. So at least when people do not understand, when they watch the video or people are doing live streaming now, they can have a good idea. That helps people to come in the future meetings as well. So I wish we keep on going to this direction. Just like it's hard to convince people to come out to vote. Right now we know to convince people to come out to even talk, all the frustration, anger, or their good ideas are as hard as telling them to come out to vote. However, issue 24 was a success. We should continue that trend. Thank you.
Okay, we have 2 minutes before our scheduled adjournment.
Thank you. So just to respond, Commissioner Hardaway to, or I'm sorry, Ridge, I don't know any of you yet. Sorry. But were you referring to, you said that the agenda was sent out ahead of time. You're talking about basically just this,
Yes.
right? So my only thing about that is that there's just so little information on it about what is going to be addressed. And I hear you, and I appreciate that you guys do send it kind of, I think it was a day, I think I got it yesterday, I believe. That was the email that was sent a day in advance, and it's helpful, it is. But also a little bit limited, so I don't, I didn't know exactly what to expect. Another thing I want to say, as a person who is generally new to coming to these meetings, quite new to coming to these meetings, thank you. I don't love that you guys are not going to be meeting twice a month anymore. There's a part of me that I don't really understand what these meetings are for. And I'm glad that they exist, at least for an opportunity for us to express stuff. I am very glad to hear from the guests who come, and it's informative to try to understand the dynamic between the commission and the various entities who are coming in. But I don't know what we did today, per se, and so while I feel like there's a part of me I don't want there to be fewer meetings, I also kind of struggle a little bit to understand what we are doing at all, and the kind of relationship between our guests and the commission, and part of that is an ignorance on my part and a newness on my part about the happenings. Obviously, I know that you guys have all of these committees and you meet at other times, and we're welcome to come to those and that sort of thing. And so that will hopefully help me, give me personally, Kayla, a little bit more information about some of the happenings that happen in between. But I just wanted to throw that one out there. I know that you guys have already voted on the once a month thing. I don't know, maybe that was discussed at length before at a meetings prior, and in that case, that's my bad. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Okay, we want to acknowledge Commissioner Donaldson.
Yes, just
go ahead.
really quick, I just want to use this time to plug our work groups, because part of the committees will also have work groups that community members will be able to join and actually do the work. So in addition to the full meeting, the committee meetings, they're all public. We will have work groups as well. So just keep that in mind also.
And the last comment is that if you go to YouTube, under the CPC, you can go back and see our earlier meetings. That would give you a better idea of the history of our work up until now, since we were actually seated at the very end of the year. So okay, y'all want to extend this meeting. Okay, that means you're going to have to end up making a motion to adjourn.
Madam Chair, you know that's not the case with
Go
me.
right ahead. Go right.
But
right
to
ahead.
piggyback, as you can see, Ms. Williams is now speaking with that young lady. Also, don't be afraid if you're watching by stream to call our CPC office. Our staff is available and ready to educate you on this process and talk to you about what we do, because it's very difficult sometimes to understand in these strict settings. So our office is available as well. And big ups to Ms. Williams, as she is on her job already.
Thank you. Well said. Much needed. So we appreciate that last comment. And so we are scheduled to adjourn, so there's no need to make a motion. Did you have another comment?
I just wanted to say, to clarify, because I don't like, it's like the teacher in me when like someone's confused. But Kayla, just to address, previously we are required to do a certain amount of training. So what you are saying today is a part of that process. So we have to speak with the two union representatives so that we can get a better understanding of sort of like their operations. And so they will come and, give us information. We'll ask them questions. So it's just a part of our training. So these meetings will evolve over time. But what you're witnessing is just us, or all these entities that are coming. It's a part of our training.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you. Important comment. Important comment.